All right, so on to the next one. So right now what we're gonna do is we're gonna make the front be always bright. Because right now, depending on where it is, you see some darker tones, but it looks weird for some kind of beam, you know? You want the fire effect to be sort of what's coming out of it, but you also want it to be consistent at the front. So we're gonna go and add something else inside of the shader over here, inside of the material, that we're gonna create exclusively for the beam. So we're gonna give ourselves a bit of space over here. We're gonna move this back, move this one back as well. And what we are going to do is we need to add, yeah. So we already have pretty much exactly the color that we want to add baked inside of the mesh itself. So we can go from the vertex color. Actually, we won't need to use a texture. So let's move this back. Let's change the preview mesh over here to the beam. Are we gonna get a good preview? And then we're gonna move this back over here. This is the multiply. And we are going to add its own vertex color. But now that it's not a multiply, the order in which everything happens needs to be changed actually. So we are going to change the order a bit. We are going to multiply. This is our first multiply over here. We are going to keep the particle color at the end of the calculation so that whatever we add over here gets multiplied by the end result. This way that it makes it so that we can fade it out. So we are going to add its own vertex color after it has been multiplied before, and we're going to saturate this value to make sure that it doesn't go above 1. Like whatever we had added with the vertex color once more, multiplied like this, has a top value of 1, and then it gets multiplied by 15 over here. But this is so that we can keep control over what's going on. We're not going with values that exceed 1 for the alpha at least, opacity. Okay, so if I save this, I would like to see a preview, please. Okay, well, we have wrong textures set over there, but if we go here, okay, well, maybe just adding the whole thing is too much. What if I can power it actually? Power. And I'm gonna put myself a control over here. It's going to be called beam front power. I'm gonna put some spaces in between. Alright, and by default I'm gonna give it a value of 2. So if I simply plug this inside of the alpha of the opacity and in the color too, just for now, just for previewing. Okay, so we get this. Oh yeah, and it is being multiplied here. We're gonna have to do some more magic actually. Yeah, I don't want this to be added there. Yeah, I've just changed my mind. Sorry about this. So the multiply is going to be there, but we're going to have 2 different branches. Yeah. can actually plug this at the top value. Okay, so let's bring this behind. So in order for things to not get so bright, uh, well, you can actually see it. Like I was multiplying it by 15. Now if it's not being multiplied by 15, the edge is gonna be much sharper. It's not gonna be like crazy bright yellow all through the entire thing. So what we simply need to do, yeah, exactly. What we simply need to do is to actually add this value after the multiplication by 15. So we will put this there, add it together, plug this in, append. And I also want this add to be to go in the opacity, but in order to actually get a good result, I'm simply going to multiply the alpha a second time. So from here, the shader is sort of branching off. Whoops. The shader is sort of branching off over there. So what I wanted to do initially to add it before the multiply, we're going to do it, but for the alpha only. So now we get it like this. One branch is multiplied by 15 and then added with the vertex alpha. And the other branch is adding the vertex color, the vertex alpha, and then multiplying by the particle color. And we will plug this in the opacity. And you will see the result if we click save. Yes. And if we go here, we get this really nice looking thing. But it's still this is too bright. Like we're losing a bit of the information because we're adding this. So what if we just change the beam front power to a higher value, maybe 5? I'm sort of like hitting it straight up. This is looking really good. Yep, I like this. So oh, you know what? Since we are adding the alpha after this gradient over here, we kind of lost the fading out on the edge, and this is a bit too rough. So we have to go back in our material. Let me just save this setting. And we are once again going to change another setting, which is the static alpha over here. I would like the static alpha's multiplication to come after this add over here. So the branch where our shader branches off in two different values for the color control and the opacity, we're going to actually make it happen sooner. So everything we have up there is fine. What I want to isolate is my static alpha. Yeah. So I'm going to remove this and going to move this back here. All right, so this one branch up here is being multiplied afterwards. And same thing here, we are going to put a multiply. And we are going to get the same value here. So now the opacity, where we control the opacity, the multiplication of that texture happens after the add as well. And also I forgot to add a saturate node. So let's just make sure that we have it, just for the sake of having a good control, understanding what's happening. Because it's useless to have an alpha above 1. It does nothing. So that's why I like when plugging anything in the alpha, I like to put a saturate, just in case that it might create some issues with the rendering somehow. I know that we are getting some sort of spaghetti right now, but I think this is as bad as it gets. I think the shader is actually completely working 100% now. It looks bad here, but if I go here, we are getting that fade out. Yep, I like this. Now, oh yeah, we do have one last thing to do. Since we are adding the vertex color over there to itself, we want this to happen on the beam, but we don't want this to happen on the slash itself. See, we kind of messed up what was happening. So this can simply be prevented if everything that we are adding over here is not added anymore. So I'm going to show you something pretty useful, and it's called a switch. This is static switch parameter. We want our switch to control whether we are adding the vertex color or not, because we were not before, and this is the way it was working with the previous with the slash itself. So right now we're adding this value over here, and if we didn't have this add in there, it would be the equivalent of adding 0. You know, when you add 0, nothing's really going on. So we are going to rename this switch to I don't know, enable front enable front opacity, enable front. What would sound good? Enable beam alpha. So we are going to plug this in true. So whenever this checkbox is checked, it's going to pass whatever we plugged in true. And when it's set to false, we are simply going to put 0. So let's put this in the add, and let's put this in the other add up there. So let's save it. So now the default value is set to 0. So we get the same result that we had before we did any of all of this, meaning that our slash is looking like it should be. And if we go in here and we enable that checkbox, I'm just gonna wait for this to compile. It's so slow. Am I recording? I am. Okay, got it. Thank. Okay, so if I click this, please just show the result. Three, two, one. Nope. Maybe I need to click save. There we go. Et voila. See the difference? Now it's an additional control that we have to have this mesh front. So at this point, I almost did everything. So what you will need to do is to create another instance of this, cross them together so that it's shaped like an X. So it will need to have a rotation. It will need to shoot forward. I want you guys to add some sparks during the final slash. So instead of taking a video from the previous version of it that I did, because I almost did the entire thing again, I'm simply going to proceed from this version, and the result will be the actual video that I want you guys to replicate. So yeah, I guess that leaves us with just one final video, which will be the effect itself presented for you to be to reproduce. All right, so I will stop the recording, and I hope that all my videos are working well. I will rewatch them entirely, so just to make sure.